Story 1. The Night Shift. Jason had always heard that the night shift at McDonald's was eerie, but he chalked it up to overactive imaginations and local legends. Desperate for a job, he took the shift anyway, hoping the extra pay would help him out of his financial slump. His first night began innocuously enough, with a handful of customers and the usual fry orders. As the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere grew heavier, the fluorescent lights casting an unsettling glow on the empty booths and plastic trays. At 12:15, the first peculiar customer arrived. A man with hollow eyes and a vacant expression walked up to the counter, ordering something. Jason had never heard of the midnight meal. When Jason hesitated, the manager, a gaunt figure named Mr. Green, stepped in and fulfilled the order from a hidden compartment in the back. "Just do what they ask, mister," Green whispered, "and never, ever look into their eyes." Unease crept over Jason, but he continued his work, chalking it up to nerves. The next few hours passed in a blur of strange orders and even stranger customers. Each one seemed less human than the last, with pallid skin and a cold, lifeless demeanor. Jason's unease turned to dread when he noticed they all left behind a greasy, black residue on everything they touched. Around 3 a.m., Jason's curiosity got the better of him. He sneaked a peek at the hidden compartment while Mr. Green was distracted. What he found was a set of ancient, leather-bound menus inscribed with symbols that made his skin crawl. The ingredients listed were nothing he'd ever seen: essence of fierce shadow of the moon and whispered secrets. Jason's heart pounded as he realized this was no ordinary menu. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a chilling cold filled the room. The last customer of the night entered, a woman with eyes like voids and a smile that didn't reach her lips. "Midnight meal, please," she whispered. Jason's hands trembled as he prepared the order, feeling her gaze burn into his back. As he handed over the meal, she leaned in close and whispered, "You should have left when you had the chance." In an instant, the room plunged into darkness. When the lights flickered back on, the restaurant was empty. Mr. Green was gone, the strange customers vanished, and Jason was alone. Except for the whisper in his ear, "Welcome to the night shift, Jason." He turned to see his reflection in the window, his eyes hollow and lifeless. It's like the customers. He wasn't going home. He was part of the midnight meal now. Story 2. Ronald's Revenge. It was supposed to be a harmless prank. Derek and his friends had too much to drink and thought it would be funny to vandalize the Ronald McDonald statue at their local McDonald's. They spray-painted crude symbols on the clown's face, snapped off his plastic fingers, and laughed as they drove away. The next day, Derek woke up with a pounding headache and a nagging sense of unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. Shrugging it off, he went about his day, only to notice a figure in a clown costume following him. It was subtle at first, a glimpse in his rearview mirror, a flash of red and yellow in a crowded street. By evening, Derek's nerves were frayed. He told his friends about the clown, but they laughed it off, mocking him for being paranoid. As night fell, Derek's unease grew into dread. The clown was outside his house now, standing motionless under the street lamp, its painted smile grotesque in the flickering light. Derek shut his blinds, trying to convince himself it was all in his head, but the tapping started. Soft at first, like raindrops, then louder, more insistent. He opened his bedroom window, peering into the darkness. There on the lawn stood Ronald, his eyes glinting with malice. Derek slammed the window shut, his heart racing. The clown vanished as quickly as it appeared, but Derek couldn't sleep. He kept hearing whispers, too faint to understand, but filled with menace. The next day, he found his friends had started experiencing strange occurrences: 2 car accidents, break-ins, mysterious injuries. Each incident was accompanied by sightings of the clown. Desperation set in. Derek's friends began disappearing one by one, leaving only cryptic messages and signs of struggle. Derek knew he was next. He barricaded himself in his house, clutching a baseball bat, waiting for the inevitable. It came at midnight. The lights went out, and the whispers grew louder, filling his mind with dread. Derek felt a presence behind him, cold breath on his neck. He turned, swinging the bat, but hit only air. Ronald stood before him, more sinister than ever. "You shouldn't have messed with me," the clown hissed, his voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. Derek's scream was cut short. When the police arrived, they found only the baseball bat, covered in black, greasy residue, and Derek's eyes hollow, lifeless, and wide with terror. In the morning, the Ronald McDonald statue was back in its place, pristine and untouched, but with a new, unsettling addition of baseball bat clutched in its hand, stained with grease. Story 3. The Secret Sauce. Emma was thrilled when McDonald's introduced its new, highly anticipated sauce. Everyone in town raved about its taste, claiming it was like nothing they'd ever experienced. The lines stretched out the door, and the buzz was infectious. After work, Emma decided to try it for herself. The drive-thru attendant handed her the bag with a knowing smile. "You're gonna love it," he said, his eyes gleaming strangely. At home, she opened the container and dipped a fry into the thick, dark sauce. The first taste was extraordinarily rich, tangy, with an inexplicable depth of flavor. She couldn't stop. Fry after fry, she devoured them, feeling a strange euphoria wash over her. That night, Emma had vivid nightmares. Dark, twisted visions of shadowy figures and whispering voices filled her dreams. She woke up drenched in sweat, her heart pounding. Dismissing it as a fluke, she went about her day, but an inexplicable craving gnawed at her. By lunchtime, she was back at McDonald's, ordering more fries with the addictive sauce. The sensation was even stronger this time, the euphoria more intense. She felt invincible, but the nightmares worsened. Each night, the whispering grew louder, the figures clearer. Emma noticed changes in herself. She was becoming irritable, paranoid, and obsessed. She began seeing the shadowy figures from her dreams in her waking hours, lurking at the edge of her vision. Her friends grew concerned, but she pushed them away, consumed by her need for the sauce. One evening, unable to resist any longer, she went to McDonald's just before closing. The restaurant was empty except for the manager, a gaunt man with hollow eyes. "I need more sauce," she demanded. He gave her a cold, knowing smile. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last. The chef is waiting for you." Confused and desperate, Emma followed him to the kitchen, where a door she'd never noticed before stood ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of the sauce. In the dim light, she saw a figure hunched over a cauldron, muttering in a language she couldn't understand. The chef turned, revealing a face twisted by malevolent delight. "You've tasted my creation," he hissed. "Now you'll join those who came before you." Emma tried to run, but her body betrayed her, drawn inexorably towards the cauldron. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the faces of her missing friends, their eyes empty and lifeless, whispering her name. The next day, McDonald's introduced a new employee, Emma, her eyes hollow and her smile vacant, ready to serve the next customer their irresistible secret sauce. Story 4. The Frozen Ones. Sarah had worked at the local McDonald's for years, but she had never seen anything like the new shipments. The meat supplier had changed, and now enormous crates arrived weekly, each marked with a strange faded emblem. They were always cold, unnaturally cold. One evening, as she was restocking the freezer, Sarah noticed something odd. A crate had been damaged, its side split open to reveal not just meat, but something else, something that looked disturbingly like a human hand. Her breath hitched, and she took a step closer, heart pounding. It was a hand, pale, lifeless, and frozen solid. Sarah stumbled back, eyes wide with horror. She rushed to find the manager, Mr. Jacobs, who dismissed her claims with a wave. "It's just a mannequin part. Don't let your imagination run wild," he said with an unconvincing smile. But Sarah couldn't shake the image from her mind. The hand had looked too real, too human. That night, she decided to investigate further. Long after closing time, she returned to the freezer, prying open another crate with trembling hands. Inside were more than just meat packages, there were bodies. Frozen, with eyes wide open and expressions of terror etched into their faces. Sarah gagged, stumbling backward, the icy air chilling her to the bone. These weren't mannequins, they were people. Panic set in. She had to call the police, expose whatever gruesome secret this was. But as she reached for her phone, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Mr. Jacobs, his expression dark and sinister. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said, his voice eerily calm. "The supplier has very specific requirements. The meat must be fresh, and we must meet the demand." Sarah backed away, but Mr. Jacobs advanced, a cold glint in his eyes. "They come in as shipments, and they leave as patties," he said, grabbing her arm with a grip like iron. She struggled, but the cold was overwhelming, sapping her strength. Mr. Jacobs forced her into the freezer, locking the door behind her. The last thing she saw through the frosted glass was his face, twisted in a grotesque smile. The next morning, a new shipment arrived. The employees found a fresh crate in the freezer, marked with the same strange emblem. As they opened it, they recoiled in horror. Inside, among the frozen meat, was Sarah, her eyes wide open, her face frozen in a scream. The shipments continued, and the customers kept coming, oblivious to the secret ingredient in their favorite meals. And somewhere in the darkness, Sarah's frozen eyes watched, forever trapped in a nightmare.